In a few simple steps, we're going to show you how to drive your new stove so it performs just how it should, burning efficiently and in an environmentally friendly way. Put your feet up, relax, and get ready for your first Euroheat driving lesson in the company of your own personal stove trainer, Gordon. There's more to wood than meets the eye, a lot more. The wood you use on your stove will decide how well it performs. If it's too damp, it will create lots of smoke and not much else. Wood that's just been cut is as much as 70 or 80% water. That's a pint for an average 12-inch log. And no wood will burn properly while it still contains high levels of water. As well as blackening the stove window, damp wood will build up undesirable elements in your chimney. Wood takes a long time to dry out properly. This might never happen if it's stored outside in our damp climate, so finding a reliable source of good quality green, unseasoned wood that you're going to dry, or good quality dried wood, is a must. If it's properly seasoned, the wood's moisture content will be 20% or less. It's also a lot lighter to carry around. So what you need is seasoned dry wood, at least a year old, preferably older, and stored properly. What do we mean by properly? Well, to dry out, the wood needs plenty of air to circulate freely around and through it. A good wood pile is built on top of a base that allows air to pass through and carefully arranged in layers. It must be open on at least two sides, but waterproofed on top. Split wood both dries and burns a lot better than unsplit logs. So if your logs are intact, it will always pay to split them. Alternatives to burning logs are smokeless coal or high-quality anthracite. Ordinary bituminous house coal does not burn cleanly and will almost inevitably clog your stove and chimney with soot and tar deposits. This is it, the first and probably most important part of your Euroheat driving lesson: preparation. The first thing you should do is set the air direction lever on the left of the stove to the midpoint for lighting. That means air enters the stove from both the bottom and the top. The air volume dial, meanwhile, should be turned to maximum. Loosely crumple just 3 or 4 single pieces of newspaper, tabloid size is fine, or tear a double broadsheet piece into 2. Then place some pieces of dry kindling over the paper in a loose wigwam shape, leaving gaps in between. Always make sure you leave room for the air to circulate. The air supply is all important. If you put too much paper in, it will restrict the underfire air and the stove could go out. Finally, add a small split log to either side. Having made sure that the paper is accessible in 3 or 4 places, you're now ready to light up. Use long matches if you can to avoid getting burned. And there she goes. That's how easy this stove is to light, if you follow the guidelines. After a couple of minutes, as soon as the kindling is burning vigorously, you can move the air direction lever from the mid-lighting position to the top wood-burning position for over-fire air and leave it there. Unlike the controls of most stoves, the precision engineering is designed to be left alone rather than messed about with. With the kindling burning well and the stove operating with over-fire air only, you can now add 1 or 2 small logs. To avoid any smoke passing into the room, always open the door slowly. Use the fire glove supplied with your stove to add the wood, leaving ample gaps between them for that all-important airflow. When these logs are burning nicely, you can add a few more. After 10 minutes or so, enough heat will have built up in the flue to reduce the air volume from the maximum down to its normal working setting, normally halfway around the dial. Once you can see flames rising from the middle of the logs, the stove is well and truly going. And that's really about it. From now on, the stove literally takes care of itself. All you have to do is adjust the temperature to your desired setting. And add more logs as and when you feel the need. So one of the key things to remember is not to be tempted to tinker. You might be used to having to open ash pit doors or adjust levers to get the stove going or regulate the temperature. None of this is necessary. In fact, it will have the opposite effect, creating smoke and burning the volatile gases out of the wood too quickly, sending them straight up the chimney. Relax. You made a good choice. The stove will do the work for you just as long as you leave it alone. The printed user guide that came with your stove has loads of useful information presented in an attractive and informative way. For instance, you'll find out about advanced stove driving techniques, like emptying the ash pan while the stove is burning. Marginally opening the upper door first before you remove the ash pan will stop the stove turning temporarily into a roaring inferno. If you want to keep your stove burning overnight, you need to build up a bed of fuel that will stay alight for up to 12 hours. To do this, build up the stove with logs at least an hour or so before you plan to go to bed. Place the logs towards the front of the stove. This gives a great flame display while they burn and means charcoal banks up behind them at the rear of the stove. Let the logs burn down naturally, so that what's left is glowing charcoal without any flames. Then shut the stove's air volume down as low as it will go and leave it. When you come back to the stove in the morning, the charcoal will still be burning cleanly. If you put the air direction lever back to the midpoint for a short while, as if for lighting, and turn the stove up again, it will soon come back to life, ready for you to add more kindling. It's easy when you know how. The principles of burning manufactured smokeless coal or anthracite are much the same as those that apply to wood. Light the fuel with crumpled newspaper and kindling, or you can use firelighters. When the coal is alight, you can add another layer, gradually building up the fire, leaving the lever in the mid position for smokeless coal, or closing off the overfire air for anthracite. Before adding any further layers of coal, you should make sure that there are no significant flames, and always riddle the grate. As with wood, it's all about getting the stove burning correctly and leaving it. Of course, people don't always get it right. Not everyone will read the instructions or watch this video. We've put together a top 10 of the most common mistakes people make, so you can avoid them. First, number 10, too much paper. This will restrict air and prevent the stove from lighting properly. If you use large pieces and screw the paper up too tightly, it will smoulder rather than burn with proper flames. Similarly, at number 9, overdoing the kindling. Remember, you only need just enough to ignite the logs. At number 8, we have too many logs too soon. Piling masses of large logs onto the stove will simply suffocate it and create lots of smoke. At number 7 is leaving the stove on the midway lighting setting when burning wood, instead of changing to the correct top position. The impressive roaring fire effect is strictly temporary and will burn out all too quickly. The number 6 hazard is leaving the stove's air volume dial at maximum. Maximum is for lighting only. By leaving it at this setting, far too much air passes through the stove, and this excess air actually starts to cool it down. In at number 5 is opening the ash pit door while the stove's burning to give it a boost. At best hopeless, at worst potentially dangerous. Number 4 driving hazard is loading up the stove with fuel to burn overnight. This might be how it used to be done, but if you've not let the logs burn down before going to bed, you'll just end up with a pile of smouldering wood, which will simply create lots of smoke to blacken the glass. Number 3 is using bituminous house coal. This will burn pretty well, but it will also leave a layer of residue on the inside of your chimney flue. So please, don't do it. If you're not burning wood, you can always burn smokeless coal. At number 2 comes the old stovey's perennial problem: excessive fiddling. Excessive fiddling with this or that control will result in much frustration, ultimate failure, and may even damage your stove. Finally, number 1, the root of about 80% of issues people have with a stove or chimney: using wet wood. This is always a bad idea and guaranteed to produce lots of smoke, blackened glass, and not much else. So buy old, seasoned wood. Or if you do buy green wood, make sure you dry it properly in a wood store. By reading the user guide and following the simple instructions on the DVD, your new stove will give you years of faithful, trouble-free service.